Mr. Lips, the chairwoman and I have been interested in duplication and have a bill actually to have reports on bills from the CBO, whether or not we already are doing this through another program. You mentioned that we hand out FEMA grants that already deal with cybersecurity. In your opinion, would a new grant program just for cybersecurity be a duplication of what we're already doing through the FEMA grants?
I believe so, particularly since cybersecurity is an allowed use of the existing FEMA grants.
And I think this is an important question because money doesn't grow on trees. We're, institutionally about $1 trillion short every year just for Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, military. We're short on just the ordinary expenses, and we've been adding extraordinary expenses of trillions of dollars. Last year, the deficit over $3 trillion, likely over $3, maybe even $4 trillion this year. So we have to figure out how to most wisely use our resources. I was intrigued by your point, though, that even without legislation, we're giving $1 billion a year. So we've done about $5 billion over the last 5 years, and yet we have only spent a little over half of it. Has that money been given in grants and just not spent by the recipient, or it hasn't been yet applied for?
My understanding is that it's been awarded and that it's with the states and that it could be put to use. Why states have not spent that is not fully clear to me.
Right. I think that's worth a letter, and maybe the chairwoman might consider that we send a letter asking, if the money's been allocated and it's for cybersecurity, asking the people who received it to tell us why they haven't used it yet or what the problem is, maybe trying to figure out, what's going on with that money. And
I'm certainly happy to consider that. I think this depends a lot on what the overall grant is and how much is restricted.
Yeah, and our staffs can work together to figure that out. But it's also interesting that even without legislation, Secretary Mayorkas has increased the requirement from 5% to 7.5%. So that's a 50% increase in the funding. So instead of $5 billion, it'll be $7.5 billion over the next 5 years.
Sorry, my understanding is that it's actually out of that pot of funding. So out of $1 billion. It's 5% is required to be spent on cybersecurity, and he's increasing it to 7.5%.
Okay, so the whole $5 billion doesn't go to cybersecurity. No. It's 5% of that, and he's increasing that to 7.5% of that. So it's more like, okay, I got where we are. But the other possibility is you could even go up even more significantly. We could either do that through legislation. We could say 20% of that money needs to go to cybersecurity. If we really thought cybersecurity was a pressing issue, we could try to reallocate or resource that money that already exists.
Absolutely, Senator Paul, and I think it would be wise for Congress to consider doing that. The FEMA grant programs for Homeland Security were expanded and created after 9/11, and the intention was for them to be risk-based and to focus on existing security threats. 20 years later, it's clear that this has become a serious security threat and should be prioritized. So it would make a lot of sense for more of those funds to be used to address these problems.
And while I think we all agree that cybersecurity is a problem, putting it in perspective of our overall national security is an important one. You talked about weighing how much we spend on national defense, but also there have been remarks from even folks within the military community. Admiral Mullen said a few years ago that the greatest threat to our national security was actually our debt. So I think we can't, on the one hand, say we're going to throw unlimited resources. We have to be careful about where the resources are and try to redirect resources to a problem. If we think cybersecurity is a pressing issue, which it sounds like it is, let's take it from maybe less pressing issues and try to force some of the money over towards that without necessarily expending more money. I'd probably support legislation if we had legislation that did what Secretary Mayorkas did. We could do it even more, figuring out what the appropriate number is. But you could take some of more of that $5 billion and push it more towards national security simply by looking at those percentages. I had one other question that's kind of a technical question, and I always ask this because I'm somewhat intrigued without being a technological or a computer expert on this. It seems like the articles that you read say most of the people get into your system through your email. Is that still true? Would half the people be getting in through email, or is that a rare way they get in?
It's certainly one of the ways that attackers get into systems, and certainly it's encouraging to hear some of the precautions that are being taken by my fellow panelists. There's a lot that can be done just to understand best practices, to improve cyber hygiene, such as not clicking on suspicious emails and other measures to.
It would seem to me that it shouldn't be that hard technologically to wall off your email, where your email has no communication you cannot get from your email to your operating system. Can you make it a wall such that it just cannot be penetrated?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. I think that there's. I'm encouraged by what the Biden administration recently put out as recommendations to address malware and ransomware. There's simple things that can be done, such as backing up systems, encrypting data at rest to make it less valuable to ransomware attackers. There are relatively simple things that can be done to improve organization security posture that should be prioritized.
20 years ago, as a physician, we used to back up our records every day on a floppy disk, and we would put them in a fireproof safe in case the building burned down or in case you had an electrical surge, you wouldn't lose all your patient data. And I know it wouldn't be on a floppy disk anymore, but it would seem that there would be ways to back this up on a daily basis and protect yourself. There's got to be ways. And so I think a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily rocket science. There are available solutions out there, and I think it's important that we get that out there for folks to prevent. The other thing I had heard a lot was that people were doing a lot of more work from home. They'd be working on either their phone or their computer, and they hadn't done the updates. And the updates are pretty sophisticated to protect against viruses, and I'm guilty of it too, not always pushing to accept the update, and that maybe that has been part of the problem in the last year as well.
Absolutely, and that's some of the recommendations, sir, that was included in the White House's recent memo to companies: update and patch systems regularly. These are basic actions that organizations can take to improve their security.
Thank you.